Welcome, viewers, to this special Government Information Service interview. I have with me today, very specially in our midst, it is the Minister for Education, the Honorable Emmeline Payne. This is a very special interview because we're going to be taking a look at 2020 and some of the endeavors of the ministry. We know that 2020 was a very difficult year, and we were not anticipating at all to go through anything that we went through during that year. As well, we would look at 2021, the vision, what's in store, and how it has started, because you know it has started on quite a very active foot. So let us get right into it. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much for being here.
So much,
it is a pleasure having you.
Same here. My pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So 2020 started off as a pretty normal year. You know, things were going great, and then we were slapped with this health crisis. Was the ministry even prepared for this? And tell us a bit about how you all were able to react to this.
I always describe it as that I don't think anyone was prepared. And COVID-19 came at a time when we were all excited about the year, and excited in that we had so many plans. We had just brought in a planning officer, and of course it was a first for the ministry in that regard, in that we were looking at areas that we probably had not focused on a lot before. And so we went into KPIs and we went into strategic planning and brought all the departments together, and we set the minimum standards for each department. And we felt that we wanted to go a little beyond where we were before. And we were all ready to go. Yeah. Every department had their plan. As a matter of fact, we had, I think, the first week of response from the various departments reporting on that very first month, the month of February. And then came COVID-19.
Yes, and that changed a lot of things for us. So in March, we had the announcement by the Prime Minister. And I think for a lot of people, it was a very dreaded thing to watch. I remember hearing some people say it felt like listening to addresses during the revolution time, because people were at home and you were like, okay, what's going to happen now? You know, that kind of way. And schools were shut down, basically. I think schools were the first thing to go, really, during that time, because we were trying to take precautionary measures. The ministry was not prepared for that.
Not at all.
So what happened next?
And maybe if I go a little back, now we were looking on China, the US, we were looking on. And we thought, as a precaution, let us increase supplies. Let us increase the cleaning supplies in our school. Let us ask our principals to ensure the children are washing their hands and they're taking extra precaution. So we went into ordering large supplies and we were ready to distribute. We started distributing, and then we had to go to shutdown. Breaking the news was the first thing we had to do. How do we break the news to our principals? How do we say to people that we are going to close our schools? And so what we decided to do was to bring all of our principals together, explain the situation, and at that meeting we said, you know, this is the next instruction to staff. It was a little bit awkward because you're moving from a situation where the only mode that you're aware of and the only mode that you've used is face-to-face. And now you're saying to persons, we are shutting down tomorrow and we are going online. Now, the very first option that we settled on as a ministry was the use of WhatsApp. And for many persons, this was like a crazy thought. How do you use WhatsApp to teach? How do you use WhatsApp to communicate with everybody? And it's amazing that now teachers are saying, I never knew WhatsApp had all these features. You know, I never realized I could have done so much with WhatsApp. So that was a challenge, of course, getting persons to even visualize how this online thing was going to happen. And of course, the ministry, the technical team at the ministry immediately went on, researched and identified a couple sites, a couple recommendations they came up with of what is it you can do in this first week, this first couple weeks of the shutdown. So we provided schools with a list of sites that children and teachers and parents can use while we worked out the logistics.
Right.
So the immediate was use WhatsApp, create your parents chat, ensure that your students are connected in a group, share information, and use this list of recommended sites. That was our first instruction. And then, of course, while we were doing that, we started getting that final phase of MStore on the road so that we can launch that online platform.
And I'm glad you mentioned MSTAR because that's the next step that we need to discuss. It's like you said, what's the next step? How do we get everyone in one space where they cannot be in the classroom anymore, to continue the learning process? MSTAR, I understand, however, didn't come about because of COVID. MSTAR was in the working before that, and COVID started to give it a push of the edge to happen. So tell us a bit about getting MSTAR going and stuff.
So MStore obviously is a project that the government had invested in before COVID-19, and maybe that was a vision that obviously turned out to be very beneficial. So that investment, the project had come towards an end, and we were finalizing that last leg because an end for the company, but not an end for the ministry. And so the company actually came forward and said, we realize that you do have a crisis. We are prepared voluntarily to work with the government, work with the ministry, to quickly upload some content, to quickly enroll 20,000 plus users. Because if you're going to add teachers, students, and if you include private schools there, over 20,000 users, about 25 or 26,000. So the company said, we are prepared to help you with all of this. And so we pulled a team quickly together. It was not very easy because imagine you've just broken this news to the schools and they are trying to figure out how do we move from here, but at the same time we need data because you need all the information for all the users so that you can register them. And so imagine this company has to now register over 25,000 users to be able to access that platform. Of course, at the ministry, we also went into identifying some content that we could immediately upload. Our priority at the time was our Form 5 students. And so all of the CXC past papers that we had, everything related to preparation for exams, we attempted to upload it on that platform so that those students could have accessed. Immediately, we pulled our best math teachers because, that's our weakest link. And they started a production. Over 70 videos were produced during that period. And the whole idea was, how do you use your best math teachers to reach all of your students? We had to get creative. So we thought, of course, GIS is accessible to us, but not to everyone. And so we had to use all of the other television stations. We were very fortunate to get partnership from our major online partners. So Party Grenada, Nike Live, MTV Facebook page. And all of these people were so very cooperative, so very helpful. And then the conversation was, what about our special needs students? Of course, you have the primary students, the secondary students, they can access the math and, all the other programs. And of course, our teachers from the special education unit immediately came to the fore and they started recording. And we were very fortunate, Abigail. We were able to get some corporate sponsors. So Republic Bank, for example, was extremely supportive in that production, financing, because we couldn't rely just on GIS. Now, everyone was affected. GIS was in a mood where at any moment you can have press conference call. You had so much that you had to be dealing with. And so we could not depend on GIS at that time to do a production like that. And so we had to get private services. Fortunately, as I said, we were able to get some funds from Republic Bank that would have funded the special needs program, and we were very, very appreciative of that. The other projects, the other programs that were recorded, of course, we had to now go into a budget because remember, we never budgeted for COVID-19. So all of the supplies, all of the 70 plus videos recorded, we had to now go into the budget and start cutting. Where do we cut? What we won't do this year anymore because we have to do this. And so that was our challenge at the time, but it didn't stop there.
Of course not.
The next challenge is that you have all the content, but we
Yes.
don't have devices.
Yes. So now it brings us to the question of devices, because we know that the ministry worked tirelessly to ensure. And as a matter of fact, the tablet in schools was a talk from a very long time ago. And COVID really came out, and it really brought out the best in a lot of us, because we had to, a lot of things that we were talking about, thinking about, planning, had to come out of the woodwork, you know. So then we had the tablet distribution, and it didn't even start there. We had to get the tablets here, and that was another issue. So tell us more about that.
It has been a rough road. So you talk about a long time ago. Our party, the New National Party, did make a commitment that we were going to provide tablets to students in school. I've been one of the persons who strongly discouraged rushing into an initiative like this. And so I remember several placards, during carnival and other activities, May Day activities, asking where are the tablets, if we are going to be drinking them and all of those kind. And I was never bothered by it because I've heard the stories. Countries that rushed into providing tablets and regretted that they did because they either got the wrong kind, it probably either didn't support the initiative they wanted to do after in terms of ebooks. And not only that, if you don't put the structure in place, the system in place, so having children with devices and not being able to connect in school because you don't have high-speed internet is a waste of resources. So I openly, in publicly as well, and openly at the party forum would have expressed that concern. It is better to take the licks, wait, and try to do it the best way you can. So we got to that point where the concern was, where are the tablets that you promised? Are they coming? We don't have. Teachers were saying, we want to teach, but we don't have a device. Now, quite obviously, finding tablets of that number, if it's 5 or 6, no problem, we run down the road and we can get some. But you're talking about over 20,000 students and you're talking about 1,800 teachers, because we did go to make that commitment as well that we were going to provide for teachers. And so we reached out, we started the procurement process, and then we got to the point where how are we going to get it from China to Grenada? And the concern was not just that, it was also the spike in the cost of shipment and the manufacturing time, because this is not like 5 devices you go on a shelf and you take. Of course, you have to go to the manufacturer now. And of course, the procurement process is another thing by itself. So we got to that point where we were able within our budget to be able to find some resources. And I always say, it's no big secret, we had to decide from the funding allocated for repairs of schools that we were going to use some resources from there and pull every other place to make up to do this. So we made a commitment. All secondary school teachers and all primary school teachers, that was our commitment, between 10 and 11,000 pieces of devices. And that order went in and we got a date. And then that date just did not materialize because COVID moved from China and now it was everywhere. And so the challenge that we had then, and the biggest challenge, was how quickly can we get those devices on island? We had to shift from one mode of transportation to another. The cost might have been increased maybe 3 times because of that, but we were very, very sure that what we needed to do was to get those devices here. And between the time of the devices being manufactured and the devices arriving, we realized how many of our primary school students were affected, because we have about twice time the number of primary school students as we have secondary. And by that time, we made another decision that we were going to go beyond secondary schools and we were going to cater for the primary school students as well as the teachers. And so we went further into procurement again, finding the resources, and we did make and fulfill that commitment of actually purchasing those devices. So those devices are also starting to arrive. We have most of them on island, and we are going to be starting the distribution for primary schools soon.
So when it came to the distribution process, so we're talking about schools closing in about March,
Mm-hmm.
and then the
Mm-hmm.
preparation for exams, and so with
Mm-hmm.
CPEA and CXC.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember we had to let some of our students back in because they had to finish SPAs and all these types
Mm-hmm.
of things. The
Mm-hmm.
tablets were not there at that time.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the tablets were not there at that time, no. But what we did as a sort of supplementary activity was to actually partner with a company overseas where we actually made an app available for our
Okay.
students. And we tried as best as possible to cater for students at the secondary school. Because remember, too, at the secondary schools, you have the labs, you have the computers there. So we were not very concerned at that point. What we were most concerned about was content and over 20,000 questions, practice questions we made available to
Of
them.
course.
Mhm.
So, in terms of the MSTAR platform, because I don't want to leave
Mhm.
this point because it's
Mhm.
so important,
Mhm.
it was not a new initiative that
Mhm.
popped up because of COVID. We
Mhm.
learned that
Mhm. Mhm.
COVID came and it pushed it
Mhm.
into
Mhm.
um, initiating and
Mhm.
operating and so
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
Grenada was recognized highly for this.
Mhm. Mhm.
You want to tell
Mhm.
us a bit about that?
Yes, and the truth is, sometimes when I sit among persons within the region outside of Grenada, I get a bit uncomfortable sharing our situation. And you don't want to sound boastful, you don't want to sound like we have done it all, but the reality is that at the regional level, we do have challenges. As I said, we were very fortunate in Grenada's case that we were able to tap into some resources that would not have been possible had it not been for some funding from the Caribbean Development Bank. So grant loan arrangement that we had already approved, the funds were there, and so we were able to do this. But unfortunately, many of our colleagues in the region did not have that opportunity available to them. And so even countries that might be considered more economically stable than we are, they were making appeals to the private sector to come out and donate and to help, right? Um, in some cases, they were making concessionary arrangements for parents. So, parents, you can import a laptop or you can purchase something online, and we're going to give you concession, when you're getting ready to clear it. So, we were very fortunate. We were very blessed. And I always like to insist on that. We were very blessed during that period that we had a source that we could have tapped into. But not just for the devices. When it got to having these students return to school, then there was the question of how are we going to ensure that the environment is safe? So you're coming from one end of the stick and you're on the other hot end. So we've crossed the bridge and now they can go back to school. And the question is, how are you ensuring that they're safe and that our teachers are safe? So now we have to think about additional resources because most of our cleaners in our schools, they work in the evening. They come after school is finished. But now you're talking about somebody cleaning continuously throughout the day. And so it means that we had to consider additional resources, additional supplies, because now you're not doing the one, as I normally like to say, which we have to change the one wash down at the end of the day, but you have to be cleaning thoroughly. And so, as simple as it might seem, we had to find another $2.5 million just for that one term that students were going back to school. Not monies that we had by that time. And the PS always like to say we scraped every bottom of the bucket that we could have scraped. And so now we had to go to cabinet to say, ministers, you understand the situation, the importance of education. We have to give up something somewhere. And so we had to get the Prime Minister, who was Minister for Finance at that time, had to instruct finance to find the resources wherever because we have to do this.
This is an entirely new era of
Mm-hmm,
learning.
mm-hmm,
And I know that a lot of our teachers, we have a lot of older teachers, we have
mm-hmm,
some that are very staunch in their ways and so on. So I understand that the ministry would have provided training for our teachers, especially so that they would have been able to navigate in this
mm-hmm,
entire
mm-hmm,
process with the devices and so on. What was the training that was offered to our teachers and how well received was it?
mm-hmm. And the training came with challenges as well because getting some people to open up to the training was a challenge, just to
Yeah.
open up to the training. And it is not just by age, meaning the
Oh.
most senior teachers. Very good friend of mine, a teacher, he's obviously in his 30s.
Mhm.
He said to me, he actually came to visit me to say, I think that's it for me in teaching. There's
Wow.
no way I can fit into this online thing. That's how
Wow.
we describe it. Very good friend of
Yeah.
mine. And I said to him, don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged,
Mhm.
you know. He said, no, this computer thing, I'm not this type of person. I don't think I could handle this. You know, I like
Right.
my chalk and talk, and that's what I'm
Mhm.
accustomed to. So even younger teachers were challenged. And then you had those who said to you, I've never used the laptop before. I never used the device. I don't even know how to turn it on. So while we were thinking about teaching teachers how to present a lesson online, how do you get into online education, e-learning, we had to now focus on computer literacy,
Yes.
right? So you, of course, had teachers across the board at different levels, some who would have done university, and so they accustomed to Moodle, and they're very familiar with online learning. So you
Mhm.
have that group of teachers. And I remember when I tested it myself and invited a teacher, just sent her my own password and access, and said, just get into this and give me your feedback. She
Mhm.
said, oh, Minister, this is just like what I used in university, right?
Mm.
Because it's the same Moodle
Mhm.
platform. So you have those teachers who are quite experienced, ready to go. And then you had those at the other end of the stick, which is persons who probably never used a laptop before, never used a
Right.
device. The only thing they were comfortable with, taking a call and making a call, right?
Yeah.
So imagine having to manage those two extremes. And the question was, how were we going to do this? And our first attempt, which worked beautifully, was to identify some of our best IT teachers in our
Right.
schools.
Okay.
We thought if teachers are reaching teachers, they might be far more receptive.
Okay.
And so we got our best IT teachers, actually engaged them in the
Mhm.
planning process, and they led the training of the teachers. And we also trained by levels. So we had the beginners level, we had the medium
Right.
level, and we had the advanced level. And during that period, we would have trained over 1,200 teachers, right?
Mhm.
Which is most of our teachers in the system. And then we thought, the vacation is coming up. We still have a lot of work to do. Um, People were complaining they're tired and they're
Yeah.
stressed and the
Yeah.
lockdown and the
Mhm.
psychological effects. And we thought, how could we go 8 weeks without training? Because
Yeah.
we have to be prepared for September.
Mhm.
And we thought, you know what? Let us just give teachers the option. Do you want to use the period for PD, personal
Mhm.
development, to continue your training, or we prepared to give you that time off?
Mhm.
And I was amazed at the hundreds of teachers who
Wow.
signed up voluntarily to
Yeah.
continue the training. Now, while we've done a lot, we are still very far away because there's so much to learn. So
Mhm.
you're not just learning computer literacy, you're not just learning how to put your work online, but you have to learn the creativity. Because if you're going to make it too boring, the children are not going to look on. And you also have to learn to use a different medium that you're going to use. So you have to
Of
learn
course.
Zoom, you have to
Yes.
learn. So if you're going to be looking at into Zoom and all the child is seeing is the roof, then you need to learn how to make sure that the
Yes.
camera is focused.
Of
So there's
course.
so much to
Yes.
learn.
Yes.
And so we could not do everything at the same time because you would have information overload. And so we
True.
will be continuing in the coming week, we will be continuing training, and training will be ongoing for our teachers.
I know, apart from the training and so on, getting teachers to be able to use the devices and that kind of thing, we're talking about connectivity because I know some parents as well would have complained, okay, well, you give my child a tablet, but with the internet, and that kind of a thing. And you hear these comments all the time. So tell us about the connectivity problem and how the ministry is able and have been dealing with that issue.
Yeah, and one of the ways is to condition your mind that
Yeah.
once you've solved a problem, then there's the next one
Oh,
to
yes.
be solved. So we basically addressed the device problem, right? And then the next issue was connectivity,
Hmm.
still outstanding. Fortunately, we are way ahead on the
Okay.
subject of connectivity. Why? Because if we're not on a lockdown, we don't have a major issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that is before COVID, again, visionary. We did that project with the CASI project, where
Yes.
we would have
Mm-hmm.
installed high-speed internet in our schools,
Also, yes.
which means that most of our students and teachers can be online at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, we are still working with Digicel, to make sure that we sort out all the little tweaking and so that needs to be done. In some cases, we do have, and quite obviously, if you're traveling from Grenville to St. George's, there are some parts over the Granite and you would cut
Well,
off.
true. Yes.
And so I would imagine, based on the location of a school, you might not
Mm.
get the kind of quality that another
Mm-hmm.
school may get. So we're working through all of those issues, but every school, a project over $3 million. And
Wow.
what was beautiful about this is that we extended it to the private schools as well.
Okay,
So from
good. Mm-hmm.
preschool all the way up to even our libraries, community libraries, were benefited from that.
Okay.
So we had that in place, which is beautiful if there's no lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So as a child, you go to school, you don't have internet at home. Of course, you can download everything that you need to use at home. You can download it. But another thing that is also beautiful is that when we went into ebooks, we ensured that those books did not require internet, that the
Good.
child didn't need
Yes.
internet at home to use them.
Mm-hmm.
But then what if I want to go onto YouTube to look at a video that is educational? Or what if I
Yes.
need to go to a site
Right.
that I need internet? So I need to Google, for example. Now that remains a challenge for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are we going to be doing? One, we actually did work with our service providers and of course the kind support, both line and digital, and they zero rated all the sites that we gave to them. So the
Mm.
MStore login platform, you did not need to have constant internet available to do so. So I always use the example, if you have $3 credit on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
you can use that all day and
Mm-hmm.
you would still have
Still
your
have
$3
your $3,
credit,
right?
right? That's a simple way of explaining zero
Yes.
rating.
Good.
And then the other thing that we took a decision on as government is that we have to start viewing internet connection no longer as a luxury, but
Mm.
as a necessity.
Yes.
So some time ago, a parent who did not have electricity would put that whenever she is
Mm-hmm.
able to do so. And now at the constituency level, we've been assisting parents to install
Okay.
electricity in their homes. Now that those would be vulnerable families and families with students in school.
Yeah.
And we have done quite a large number of persons because of course,
Wow.
if you're going to be putting internet, you must first have some level of access there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the second thing is that we are now looking at internet service in the same
Mm-hmm.
way. So in this new year, we are going to be helping families where there are students in school, where they are very vulnerable and probably never had and cannot afford. We are going to assist those families.
So that is very good to hear because I know a lot of people were very
Yes.
concerned about that.
Mhm.
And like you mentioned, going into this year, and we're going to get to that
Mhm.
soon, it
Mhm.
has started with its challenges already. So, that is very, very good to hear. So, in spite of the COVID-19,
Mhm.
the ministry continued almost as normal,
Mhm.
with other initiatives that would, um, you had other initiatives going on. I know
Mhm.
that you
Mhm.
had the schools refurbishment and you
Mhm.
had new schools
Mhm.
being built
Mhm.
and so on.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just give us an idea as to some of the other things that were happening besides the COVID challenge.
That's one of the things that amaze people. How did the ministry get to just continue like if everything was normal while dealing with all of these challenges? And I always say it's because of the support we've had from our partners. And there are some dedicated people in the Ministry of
Okay.
Education, very dedicated. Minus those two factors, we could not have done this. So our partners, our stakeholders that have been supportive, and the team that has been, there are people who went throughout the night into the morning during this period to make some things possible. And I'm so grateful to have people like that working with me. So the issue of what did we do? For example, the construction, the repairs of school, this was never interrupted by COVID-19. We continued as normal. So we published a list of over 75 schools that we were working on, and we continued throughout the year to work on those. I believe we had over $50 million
Yeah.
allocated to that. And for us, this is important because when COVID is gone, we still have to deal with those challenges. And so we were determined we were not going to stop. We have done very well in that area, but there's still a lot more work to do, and we are committed to that. Scholarships.
Yeah.
Persons felt, how could we be talking about scholarships
In a
now?
time like this, yes.
And, for us, we could not see how, at the same time, the same way, how do you not talk scholarship?
Yeah.
Because after COVID-19, we still have the development of Grenada to talk about. And so at the end of the day, we did not want to put things on pause because of COVID-19. So over $20 million committed to all of those scholarships. So in partnership with various governments, the People's Republic of China, Cuba, we had, of course, our local partnership with St. George's University, and so many persons are so grateful that in a time like this, they are not denied an opportunity. I remember one case where the Chinese ambassador actually called me into a meeting concerned. There were two students who decided they were not going. They were so afraid, so concerned, and despite all efforts made, they decided that they did not want to go. And this is interesting because while you had those two students who were afraid to leave, you were getting constant calls from other students who wanted to go. And even with the students going to Cuba, we said to them, you know that Cuba is a challenge, and we all know that there are challenges there, and we have to be so grateful to the government and people of Cuba that despite the economic challenges, they every year consistently take our students. So we know that there are challenges there. And speaking to Ambassador Charles there, she said, Minister, make sure that you're explaining to the students that this is not a bed of roses. If you really want an education, you really want to succeed, and that is your focus, of course, come.
Yeah.
But if you're soft and you don't know if you're going to make it, please stay. And so I said to PS, PS, call them, all of them, get them on a Zoom meeting and make sure you explain, make it as clear as possible what the situation is. And it was so amazing. Every student said, we still want to go. Right? Yeah. And so we were very, very encouraged by this, and we continue to work with our students. Policies, we've been working on policies throughout the year because there are so many areas. Scholarship is another one. We've been granting scholarships, and of course, there are so many gray areas, so many gray areas. So one student said that, they were told by someone in the Ministry of Education that it's okay to serve your bond in another country, which is totally not the case. Right. Yeah. Now, if you don't have things properly documented in the form of a policy, you're going to have problems. You saw what happened after the release of names of students and the request for transfers, and persons are not sure how it works. If you don't have everything documented, then you have those kind of challenges. So we wanted to make sure that this year, 2020 year, was one in which we documented as many things as possible. We put structures and systems so that the system itself would be able to function more efficiently in the new year. And we didn't want to wait for after COVID-19 to be able to do this. And that was significant. There are a couple areas that we did some major reviews, and we actually brought in teams of persons in the midst of all of this. Our school books program was one that we did a major review last year. The findings were quite revealing. The millions of dollars we were wasting there. And, sometimes people still argue, should we continue or should we not continue? When you have evidence in front of you that says, for example, that you have to discard over 30,000 pieces of textbooks, that's enough to tell you. And no major fault of yours is not that you bought the wrong book, but it's just that the edition just changed. Right? What do you do with these books? And so the challenge of helping people to understand, it is not that you have anything against textbooks. It is not that you're too technological, you're too digital. It's not that. You see, we have to be real. When you look at the amount of books we've lost, parents who never return. I mean, the evidence was just sufficient to make that decision. And so we are going to continue investing in a small number of books, but we are going ebooks. And of course, when it comes to reading, we are not saying that the children would not interact with the textbook. And that is why we are so fortunate to have GSI, for example, the construction of libraries and the stocking of those libraries with the books. Of course, we have other partners like Hands Across the Sea that have been helping, and so we are very fortunate. We have nothing against textbooks. It is just that when you're going to be investing significantly in a program like this, maybe if all the books were remaining in the school, it might be a little bit different, but then you still have to deal with what do you do with the old edition.
Okay. So let's talk numbers for a bit. During the interview, you would have alluded in some sort of way some of the money that you have had to expend. And you mentioned having to find money in all nook and cranny of the ministry just to get things going. How hard did COVID hit the purse of the ministry?
Very hard, very hard. And I know, the team at the ministry, management team, the PS, finance officer, I know this was a stressful time. There are times when the response would be, Minister, we don't have nothing left. And the response would be, such again, let's try. There must be something, there must be some way. And so it was we would have exhausted every bit of resource that we had last year, right? There was nothing remaining. There was nothing you could have found because we had to utilize everything. And so just that e-learning project initiative, I'm sure we'd have spent over 20 or committed over $20 million.
Wow.
It was, and that is not talking about the 20 million when it comes to scholarship. It's not talking about the 50 million as it relates to repairs of schools, construction of schools. And, we just did not want to put things on pause because we had a virus or a pandemic of this magnitude. Education for the government of Grenada. And I must say here, Abigail, the support of my cabinet colleagues, I could not anticipate, I could not expect more. And I think it's because everyone values education in this way.
Definitely. That is a lovely story to tell, most likely. So, Minister, as we narrow down on this discussion, we're looking at 2021 now. And I know that a lot is happening. The year has just started, but a lot has already begun, So tell us a bit about, the modes and the phases and so in terms of the return of students to school.
And COVID has been very useful, very insightful.
Yes.
And when you look at what it has done for us, I believe we are all in a better place because we have had this experience. Could have caused a lot of problem, a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort. But I think sometimes if we focus a little more on what we've been through the process, so for example, our principals, I think they are far more experienced in crisis management. I believe they would be far better able to deal with any challenge that is confronting them in the future. And so what we did was to call them all together and remind them. And I don't think it was very obvious to everybody. As a matter of fact, I did not even think about it that way until I started reflecting. We actually went through 3 modes between March and December. Total lockdown or total closure of school, partial closure of school, and full resumption of school.
Yes.
Right? Yes. By now, any principal would know what works well in a full closure, what works well in a partial, what works well in full resumption. And so we brought them back together, reminded them of what that period was like, and how do we use that knowledge, those experiences we've had to prepare for the future. So we started off in March preparing for one thing. We are going to lock our schools down. Now we're in a position where we are preparing for all 3 modes. And as I said to them, we did not have the experience, but there are some countries where you open school on Monday and then you have to shut it down on Tuesday, right? Within 24 hours.
Yeah.
We have not had that experience, but we must be ready for that experience. And so the challenge now, we are challenging ourselves to move seamlessly from one mode to the other mode. That is our challenge this term because we don't know when and we cannot figure out when, right?
Exactly.
And so that is our first objective, to try to prepare ourselves to move seamlessly from one mode to the other.
Mhm.
So the 11th of January, of course, we did say there will be a delay opening, and so we delayed by 1 week.
Right.
But we are moving to open on the 11th of January, and that would be the mode that is partial closure of school
Yes.
or partial opening. And in that mode, we would have our form size students, all of our exit forms, all our exit levels, speaking about 4 plus in the preschool, all the way up to our form size at the secondary school. Um, the whole objective there is to get these students settled in, right? Of course, we consider them to be extremely important at this phase because they are working with a deadline. They are
Yes.
preparing for exiting a particular class. So there's so much that they need to know that they probably don't know at this stage. So we gave them the first opportunity. Providing that everything remains as it is or improves, everything improves, we intend to move to the next mode, which is that we are going to move to full resumption.
Okay.
Now, there are two components of the full resumption that now is hindered and hinged upon how are we sitting in the full resumption.
Yes.
So there's so many things
Yes.
to
We
consider.
still have to observe the protocol.
We still have to observe. So persons often question, why is it that the child cannot go to school every day? There's just one simple answer: the size of the classroom versus the number of students in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's it. We never pass a rule or make a rule that says this child must come 1 day a week or that one must come 5 days a week. No. It's always to do with the 3 feet or the 6 feet physical distancing. That is what determines how many days a child would be able to go to school. So there are some schools where, regardless of 3 feet, 6 feet, even 12 feet, you'll be able to have every child in school every day. But because of the population of some schools, so large schools, Grenada W.I Secondary School, St. Andrew's Methodist School, because of the population of those schools, it would be significantly impossible for every child to be at school if there's a 6 feet physical distancing protocol in place. And so we are hoping that by the third week, which is the week following the one coming, I think it's the 18th of January, our hope is that every child would have an opportunity to return observing the 6 feet physical distancing. But as I said, there are some schools where that would be impossible. And we are hoping that based on the COVID status, based on the situation, we will be able to one day very soon move back to the 3 feet. But of course, the challenges never end because once you move to the 3 feet, then people get uncomfortable about their safety. And so we just have to continue to pray and trust God that this situation soon gets behind us.
Minister, what if it worsens? And I know that you're still in the process of distributing the devices and so on. Would the ministry be in a position of preparedness if this does worsen and we have to go to full lockdown of our schools again?
So while we're very optimistic, we have to be realistic at the same time. So what are we doing? We are speeding up all processes. So within this first week, while the students were at home, we try to ensure that every primary school teacher get the device. Right? So that was our objective. And we believe that even if we go to a lockdown, unexpected, total lockdown, we would have left our primary school students. And I feel pretty comfortable that we would find a way. We found a way to make so many things work.
It's true. Yes.
I am hoping and praying for the best, but if the worst comes, we would find solutions. I'm quite
And I think that's the new
optimistic
motto
about that.
of your ministry, finding solutions. Definitely. Minister, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Same here,
And I
same
just want
here.
to ask before we leave, are you comfortable that your ministry has really done all it can, all it can to sort of remedy the situation that we've been faced with in terms of the pandemic?
If we did all we can, I would say I don't want to be so so blatant in making a conclusion because there might be something we could have done that we probably did not know we could have done, or we probably, maybe just an oversight, or maybe we did not have all the resources to do it. So those things we could have done, we tried to do them all. We tried very hard. And as I said, so many people went beyond the call of duty. I must recognize the permanent secretary in the ministry, the chief education officer, the senior managers, all of the officers, especially those, and I like to differentiate, especially those who went beyond the call, because there's the call and there's beyond the call, and there's also way beyond the call, right? So I want to especially recognize them. And then you had on the ground, because even if we got it all right at the Ministry of Education, and if you did not have the support on the ground, then it would really not be complete. And so our principals, who were amazing, I mean, it started off very shaky, and I myself got very uncomfortable. Will they be able to survive this? Because people got very, this is very difficult, we're very stressed, we don't know how, but I really want to recognize our principals. Can't say they were all perfect, but what I do know is when we started, we did not end there.
Yes, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. The resilience, the positive attitude, and that is what leadership requires. Because if you're going to motivate your teachers, you have to be positive yourself. And so I know it came as a shock. COVID-19 came as a shock. I know it started off very stressful for everyone, but I just want to commend everyone, our teachers, our principals, the cleaners, all of the people who made it possible, and all the ancillary staff, the cooks in the kitchen, everyone who contributed. All of our successes must be credited to the entire effort of everyone who was involved in one way or the other.
Minister Ledwood, I want to thank you so much for sitting with us and chatting with us. And we also want to thank our guests for hosting us here at the GSI, the Grenada Schools Incorporated, for having us here in their very fine establishment. So thank you again, Minister. And viewers, there you have it. We were speaking with the Honorable Emmeline Pear, the Minister for Education, and we really took a look as to what happened in 2020, and we sort of framed what's going to be happening in 2021. And what we can really say when it all comes down to it is that the ministry will do what it needs to do in the face of anything that comes up. And with the minister and her team working so closely together. And really that is what it takes. Everyone doing their part, working together to get through this very difficult time. We know that 2021 may not be a very easy year, but you know what? We are going to get through it. We are a resilient people, and definitely, the experiences of 2020 would have proven that to us even more, that Grenadians are really and truly a resilient bunch of people. So I want to thank you all for joining us here. Thank you for taking the time off to listen to us and to really hear what the minister had to say. And please do remember to stay tuned to other GIS programming. I'm Abigail McIntyre. Thank you.
National javelin coach Paul Phillip says the months ahead could be challenging for Grenadian javelin thrower Anderson Peters. Peters is a professional athlete, and there is a tentative calendar of events that could take him on the circuit in Europe and around the world. At the Central American and Caribbean Games, National javelin coach Paul Phillip says the months ahead could be challenging for Grenadian javelin thrower